First, I just want to introduce myself very briefly. I am a professional folk musician, and I am also a faculty member here in the Center for Arts and Medicine at the University of Florida. And this project that I will be describing to you today very briefly in about 10 minutes, and then Colleen will take about 10 minutes to describe her project, and we can have a little conversation with whatever time is left. The project I'll be describing to you is a pilot project that I ran with a co-presenter of mine last spring, the spring of 2023, here in Gainesville, Florida. And I'm going to call it Whatever the Weather, which is the title of the song that resulted from a community-based songwriting effort that we conducted here. And I just wanted to pick out some of the wonderful things that Beth said as I was able to loop in at the end of her conversation around this idea of public and shared contemplative spaces. This is central to this pilot project that I worked on here in Gainesville as well, where we centered conviviality and community creativity in shared songwriting. And so I'm going to just talk a little bit about the process that we went through and what some of the outcomes were. I just have to elevate this idea of the timing of the trees as well. Some of these metaphorical themes also it was a joy to explore metaphorical ways of understanding the so-called mundane experience of life in this process with community members. I also want to highlight it doesn't cost much potential theme that I could pull out of the last bit of Beth's talk that I heard, which is that this event also, it doesn't cost much to bring people together and be creative and to intentionally contemplate things like climate change, our pasts, and our futures. Actually, before I go on to that slide, I just really feel like because this is a presentation about musicking and songwriting, that I just wanted to share with you the first song that ever showed to me the power of music to reorient our thoughts toward interconnectivity and toward a relational way of being with human and non-human life. And it's called Earth, My Body. And I will just sing it twice. And if you want to hum the melody because it repeats, I would really, really invite you to join in if you'd like to. And it goes like, Earth, my body, water, my blood, air, my breath, and fire, my spirit. Earth, my body, water, my blood, air, my breath, and fire, my spirit. Earth, my body, water, my blood, air, my breath, and fire, my spirit. Yes, even with a nice delay, I could hear you humming. Thank you so much. That warms my heart. Yeah, gives meaning to the whole thing. Okay, I just keep an eye on the time. I can't remember. I don't know exactly when I started, but I'll probably keep this to 6 or 7 minutes from now just to keep you posted, Colleen. Something that I wanted to ask as a social scientist and also as a professional musician and songwriter, a folk songwriter, is what does climate change mean to Floridians? Florida is a symbol of climate change in its own way. I included in my presentation, I will pull it up now, but I had it at the end here. This is a meme from the 2018 midterm elections. Florida is a symbol for both like the consequences of climate change and also the contradictions. This was a kind of meme associated with my dissertation research that indicates like Florida, you, the citizens, don't know how to deal with climate change. And also you are going to reap the worst consequences of it. So within that sort of kind of cultural context, I'm interested in just having conversations with Floridians. Like, what does climate change mean to us? We had a songwriting event here that aims to center sort of conviviality. And for me, that's important to elevate in terms of like coming from a social science background here at at a land-grant university where so much emphasis is on extension projects. And I'm not sure if that stuff is how many of you are familiar with that US-based federal program, but it's very like science-based communication, strategic communication kind of background. And so pulling away from that a bit and centering like participant engagement and creativity and experience feels really important to do here where I am located in this research world. And so in a nutshell, with centering conviviality, we came together to try to come to a shared definition and of climate change and extreme weather together, what our experiences are, how we envision challenges in the future, and to ultimately inform and write a song. So I just wanted to outline a bit about how we went about fostering a nurturing environment for creativity amongst a group of adults that did not know each other beforehand. And what we didn't start off by writing a song together. We started first with like paper and watercolors, and participants were invited to play with the colors, and they were invited to be creative around the idea of extreme weather and climate change. And these are some of the watercolors that came out of that. It's like, when you think of climate change, what do you think of? When you think of extreme weather, what do you think of? And so these were some of the results. And so this was sort of like the our version of an icebreaker activity for nurturing a creative experience. And from here, this is where we implemented some of the facilitation strategies of coming to shared themes, shared main ideas. So after we first did that like watercolor painting work, we talked about what came out in their reflection process while they were doing this watercolor work. And these were some major themes that we came up with. We had a group conversation. Do we agree with this? Or these are all is this where you guys would organize these the description words that came out during the watercolor process. And I just wanted to emphasize that throughout the process, I think that the participants surprised themselves with the diversity of perspectives that they themselves held on the meaning and significance of climate change. And a big theme that I want to call attention to is, like, as I showed you in the previous slide, this is one of the watercolor paintings that was produced during what comes to mind when you think about climate change, which is, and he described it, a dark cloud. It's ominous. It is like kind of mysterious and scary. It's bigger than me kind of thing. But then when I asked participants, and when we did like shared like collective memory making, we reflected on past extreme weather events that we all had experienced as residents of Gainesville. And without fail, all of the memories that were conjured were around community resilience and engagement together. And so what I found really interesting, as someone who's also interested in how the whole idea of climate change gets constructed in, for example, IPCC reports with past data informing our future projections, I became really fascinated with this idea about how can our lived past experiences of resilience, of coming together in times of, extreme weather and so-called destruction, how can we use those to build and put our focus on resilience efforts going forward? And yes, let me keep my eye on the time. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. Just very quickly, the outcomes of this pilot, within 36 hours of this songwriting activity, me and my co-facilitator, Kat Wright, who's also a professional songwriter and performer, wrote a song based on the emergent themes and some of the direct, like they wrote stories and haikus also as a part of the event. We wrote and recorded a song in 36 hours, which was a little bit insane, to be honest, but we had a limited timeline of being able to work together. So it was cool to see that come together really quickly. And just in terms of this, a really small group, but I was floored by the intensity of the participant feedback and how much they not only appreciated it, but could were reflected upon how their own concepts of climate change changed by having the space, the public shared space of getting creative around climate change. And I just have to agree with Beth on that. And Colleen will bring another example here about how making that creative space together can help us not only change our ideas of what climate resilience looks like, but I think that it can do the work of fostering the pathways thinking that we can hold together to manifest a climate hope. The topic of this conference. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Colleen because I know that we have limited time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Hi, everyone. I'm Colleen Rua. I'm Acting Associate Dean of Research and Strategic Initiatives for the College of the Arts at the University of Florida. My dog is having a rough evening, so if he is vocal, I apologize. And thank you so much for being here. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully you can see it. And I will also vacillate between sort of more formal reading from a chapter of my recently published book and just kind of more casual conversation about this project. Are we seeing this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Awesome. Great. Thank you. Okay. Disaster in the Body is the name of a larger project that I've been working in collaboration with my colleague Rachel Carrico in dance that brings together artists from Puerto Rico, which is where I work, and New Orleans, which is where she works, and more recently, artists from Florida who are impacted by hurricane and other disasters. So Julio Morales, who is in the front of this photo, co-founder of the San Juan-based Y No Había Luz Theater Collective, walks the perimeter of the 80-seat black box theater, securing windows and ensuring that instruments, props, costumes, and puppets are safely stored. A tropical storm is moving toward Puerto Rico. It is September 2020, and by now this activity of preparing is a ritual, not just for Morales, but for the nearly 3 million citizens of the island. Luckily, the space is safe, he tells me. For now, we're doing good. He told me this in a conversation over Zoom since the COVID-19 global pandemic prevented our meeting in person. My next slide shows damage to infrastructure by hurricane. Just wanted to give everyone a heads up there. In September 2017, Hurricane Irma made landfall on Puerto Rico, and 2 weeks later, Hurricane Maria devastated the island. Recovery efforts were still underway by the time the island was rocked by a series of earthquakes 2.5 years later in early 2020. By March 15th of that year, we know that a lockdown was instituted due to the pandemic. In October 2021, a state of emergency was declared as the island's power grid was deemed in critical condition. In 2022, Hurricane Fiona struck, and today, on August 15th, 2024, 700,000 Puerto Ricans are without power after Hurricane Ernesto passed over Puerto Rico yesterday. In her essay on post-hurricane performance, Laura Cahill Booth situates performing artists as first responders to disaster, distinguishing them from emergency medical technicians, the Coast Guard, and volunteers. Artist aid, she says, has come in the form of shaping or reshaping the cultural memory of the event. I consider Y No Había Luz as a case study of artists as responders to disaster. While first response work is typically considered that which focuses on bodily injury, property, and infrastructure, Y No Había Luz's work focuses on interhuman relationships that open space for reshaping collective memory and healing the spirit. And in doing so, they draw upon joy and hope as resources used to enact performances of care. In thinking about joy and defiant joy, Barbara Fredrickson, in a study conducted in 2009, concluded, among other things, that repeated experience of joy may build people's resources for survival. From a social justice perspective, Audre Lorde has offered joy as energy for change. And Imani Perry, who discusses defiant joy in relation to those who are grieving, tells us that joy is not found in the absence of pain and suffering, rather it exists through it. One might consider grief as a storm that impacts mind, body, and spirit. And in response to disaster, artists like Ino Abieluz, who work as responders, function to provide periods of calm, a metaphorical eye of the storm. Their care-based practice includes intergenerational participatory experiences, the repetition of familiar characters, the recreation of disaster juxtaposed against celebration, and a shared sense of responsibility in storytelling. They also work a lot with acts of transformation in the stories that they tell and belonging through collective representation. This model is also characterized by an attempt to transform cultural memory of disastrous events by inviting participants to explore their own roles as caretakers and by galvanizing young people through ecological movements or developing an environmental conscience. So their model of care-based practice is exemplified best in two works. One is called Centinela de Mango, and the other is called Cruzando el Charco. And lost my page, of course. Great. Since 2005, Ino Abieluz has produced work with a mission to awaken sensitivity, beauty, creativity, freedom of thought and spirit, conscience, solidarity, and social justice in Puerto Rico and the world. Their work is interdisciplinary. It's highly collaborative. They're called a theater company, but they each have various expertise, and their offerings blend music, theater, dance, film, visual art, and puppetry. Their name, Ino Abieluz, is translated as "there was no light," which clearly took on new meaning, new significance in 2017 when they were impacted by Hurricane Maria. At that time, the mayor of San Juan asked them, could you go to places where displaced folks are gathered, shelters and other places? And they struggled with what to do with that request. So I'm going to kind of share this video, which is about 3 minutes long, but I think it's important to share about their work. Can you hear it? No. Cannot hear it. It's important that you can hear it. I'm going to stop sharing because it's important that you can hear it. I also am recognizing that it is 7:25, but I promise you that it is going to be so worth it. New share. Okay, let's try this.
Comida, que no es una planta eléctrica, que no es una cosa de lo que se podría llamar de primera necesidad y que también puede caer, o sea, no, nosotros queremos venir a compartir lo que sabemos hacer, lo que podemos compartir, porque pues es lo que tenemos. Entonces,
eso es un artículo de primera necesidad. No. Lo que ustedes hacen es un artículo de primera necesidad porque ustedes saben lo que ustedes están haciendo. Están levantándole el alma a un espíritu que está caído. Así que la persona que llegue con arte a dar un poco de sí para levantar una sonrisa, para llenar de inspiración a los demás.
Okay, I think it's going to keep doing that. So given the time, I'm going to hop forward. But he says you're raising the soul of a fallen spirit. He says that you are going to recreate a new country here in this space. I'm just going to hop ahead to see if you can see any of the images of their work. It may not do. It may not do.
Es la herramienta que apacigua las almas, que inspira a las personas, que nos llena de vida. Sin arte, el ser humano no es posible que viva. Yo no he visto una señora que no coja una cancioncita y te ponga a bailar. O una persona que ve una buena obra de teatro que no llore cuando la vea. Ustedes están haciendo un trabajo de fe rispón. Es más, ustedes deben meterle en defensa civil y detrás de la ayuda que vengan por detrás a darle caja de agua y baja de comida, una obra de teatro para levantarle ese pueblo, para levantarle ese espíritu. Es necesaria su ayuda. Es una cosa indispensable. Y así que pues yo te digo que sí, es de primera necesidad. Y perdóname por decírtelo así, pero la realidad es la realidad. Y gracias por existir a todos ustedes artistas que están expuestos y se están poniendo en los sitios más recónditos de esta patria a llevar su granito de harina. Porque con cada granito de harina nosotros vamos a construir una patria nueva, fortalecida, renovada y bien hermosa. Y para eso es que nosotros estamos aquí. Y ustedes están aquí por eso, porque los inspira eso. Así que gracias a todos ustedes por existir.
So hopefully you can tell that they were unsure about what they should do, but after hearing Aleman's response, they knew that they were doing the right thing. Looking at the time, I'm just going to really quickly tell you about these two projects. Centinela de Mango, there was in Orocovis, a town in the center of the island. The centerpiece of the community was a giant mango tree, and it was felled during the storm. And so Inoabieluz worked with interdisciplinary members of the community, but specifically children, to create storm clouds that became these paper mache storm clouds. And through music and choreography and carrying the storm clouds, the children became the hurricane. And through that act of choreography and music and theater, they reframed the experience of the hurricane. And subsequently, Centinela de Mango became a children's book that is now used to sort of explain hurricane in Puerto Rico because it is so frequent. Another piece called Cruzando el Charco, or Crossing the Ocean, came out of the pandemic. The group had not been together in nearly a year because of lockdown, and we were able to commission a film piece, Cruzando el Charco, in which Funambolo, the 2-foot-tall puppet, crosses from an island to a larger piece of land, and he brings just a small suitcase and runs into a number of challenges, an alligator, this mermaid or mer person, and flames that ultimately burn the rope. And when the rope is burned, Funambolo goes into his case and pulls out a beak. And he puts on the beak, and at the end of the film, the camera pulls away and he sprouts wings and he flies rather than continuing to cross. He flies toward the camera, flying in a new direction. And Gary Helfeld, executive director of Inoabieluz, says he tries something different, and maybe it's time for us to try different things in terms of the precarity of their situation, and also in thinking about the Puerto Rican diaspora. I was fortunate enough to travel with my students to their theater space in 2022, and we created a play and brought it to tour to Orocovis, and then engaged in a comparsa, a parade with the community there, and engaged in conversation around sustainability, agriculture, gardening. Our students took part in planting activities that happened there. And then last summer, artists from Inoabieluz visited us here in Gainesville, and they created a piece called La Mar that dealt with transition and immigration. And we have also started connecting with folks in Fort Myers post Hurricane Ian, visiting them on the anniversary last year to look at ways that we might continue to use the arts to promote hope, resilience, and to share resources. I've got the barking to finish it off here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Thank you so much for your time.